Welcome to Heaven on Earth, Carter Finley Stadium, home of the NC State Wolfpack. I want to try something a little bit new, do a little bit of a podcast format. So we're going to talk about everything we need to know about the college football season coming up this fall. There's been a lot of stuff, especially with transfer portal rules. I made that video about the NCAA and how schools have to pay players now. There's a lot of moving parts here, and there's a lot to unpack. But specifically in this video, I want to talk about the most talked about quarterback transfers, my personal top 25, and then even my playoff predictions. That's right, we're doing it this early. I'm predicting the entire 12-team playoff. We're doing it here and now in June. So who else is out here predicting the playoff this early? But I think I'm going to be 100% correct. So let's just get right into it. If I'm being 100% honest, I don't know ball. I'm not an expert on football, even though I love to talk about football and sports in general. If you watch any of my videos, the actual knowledge of the game is not very high. I talk about all the stuff going on outside of the lines. I don't talk a whole lot about the gameplay itself. But that's something that I maybe want to talk about a little bit more, maybe get to know a little bit more, be a little bit of a better expert on this sort of thing. But yeah, so like I was saying, transfer portal rules are just getting crazier every year. NIL right now is kind of the driving force of transfers. Essentially, players are entering the portal as a baseline. If you're not entering the portal, that means that you're getting some really good money. There's really no team loyalty anymore. So players are coming and going as is. And there are even instances of teams pushing players out, saying, hey, we already have someone else coming in, so we don't want you anymore. Don't care how well you played, don't care how bright your future is, you can go do that somewhere else. We saw that with Ohio State and their quarterback. Even NC State and MJ Morris, they essentially forced him out of the team. Now, he kind of did it to himself, but yeah, his story was an interesting one. If you're interested, definitely look into that and see what's going on with him. But he went to Maryland. Good riddance. I think that we got a better guy. So with that being said, let's talk about my favorite quarterbacks, or not even my favorite quarterbacks, but kind of like the most talked about quarterbacks. Because the first one I want to talk about is Cam Ward. He was from Washington State, transferred to Miami. The way that the media is kind of portraying him is he is the best transfer quarterback in the country. I think that he's very good, but is he the absolute best? I mean, I'm not really sure, because Washington State went 5-7 last year. I know that Washington State isn't really all that great of a program, so you can only read so much into that. But he had 25 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. He had 8 rushing touchdowns, which is pretty good. He has like good numbers, right? But I don't think that they're anything that like stands out. So I think that he might just be a little bit overrated. I think that just the fact that he's going to Miami makes him kind of a hot name to talk about. I think that he's going to be good at Miami. Don't get me wrong there. So any Miami fans that want to hate on me, I think that he's good, but I do think that he's a little bit overhyped. I don't think that he's Miami's Lord and Savior, like a lot of people are making him out to be. Now, someone that's maybe a little bit underrated on the other side is Will Howard, going from K-State to Ohio State. For whatever reason, people are kind of questioning this move. Like, Ohio State doesn't really know what they're doing, getting a guy from Kansas State. What are they doing, getting a guy from a smaller program? Will Howard's really good. He won a Big 12 championship. I believe he was second team All Big 12 last year. And, you know, he might not be the flashiest guy, but he literally doesn't need to be. You're playing for Ohio State. You have a group full of all-stars around you. Ohio State, they got rid of Kyle McCord for a reason. It wasn't like Kyle McCord went to Syracuse because he wanted to play there instead of Ohio State. Obviously, he would want to play on a national championship contender, but they wanted Will Howard. They wanted someone that fit their program a little bit better, even though Kyle McCord had an 11-1 record. Not good enough. They think that Will Howard can probably go undefeated. So if that's what the guys at Ohio State are thinking, they probably know ball better than I know ball. So I trust that that is a good move. I think that Will Howard will be a great quarterback at Ohio State. Now let's talk about Riley Leonard from Duke to Notre Dame. Uh, I've watched him play at Duke. I'm from Raleigh, so obviously I'm going to watch the local teams. And he was really good, especially when he was healthy. When he was healthy, he was a threat. He absolutely embarrassed Clemson when they played against each other. And really the only thing that started to set him back throughout the rest of the year was he had a lot of injuries. He was kind of playing through injuries for most of the season, eventually had to step away and not play anymore because it just wasn't sustainable. But the fact that he was even able to play through any games with injury kind of says a lot about his character. I think that he's going to be pretty good at Notre Dame. Sam Hartman, that experiment didn't pan out. He was way overhyped last year. I was saying it from the start. It really upset me that no one else saw the things that I saw with him. Sam Hartman was a guy that was really good when you don't pressure him. But the second he sees the blitz, he throws it in the turf. That's exactly what happened at Notre Dame. He had a hot start at the beginning of the year and then kind of started to not play as well towards the end of the year once teams figured out his game. And then now he's undrafted. I forget which team even picked him up. But I don't think that Riley Leonard is the same guy at all. I know that he's coming from a small school in North Carolina compared to Notre Dame, but completely different player. He's got the size, he's got the heart, he's got the brain. I think the only thing that Sam Hartman had over Riley Leonard is, unfortunately, Riley Leonard, no hate man. Sam Hartman's just more handsome. Hate to break it to you. He's just a handsome man. But yeah, I think I like Riley Leonard at Notre Dame. Not a Notre Dame fan, but I think that's a good fit for him. I think that Notre Dame will benefit from having him. Let's talk about Kyle McCord again. I kind of mentioned how Ohio State kind of threw him to the side. They didn't really want him. It was kind of strange because he was the outright starter at Ohio State. He had good numbers. He was in the mix for getting into the playoff, but they obviously didn't get to the place where they wanted him to. And yeah, so they moved on. Now, we have to remember that Ohio State had an absolutely stacked roster, especially at wide receiver last year. Marvin Harrison Jr., of course, best wide receiver in the draft class. So how good is he actually? Is Syracuse really going to be amazing because they have Kyle McCord now? I mean, they'll probably be better. There's no way that Kyle McCord would be worse than whoever Syracuse's quarterback was last year. And I'm pretty sure Syracuse has a new coach this year. So we'll see. It'll be a fresh start for them. I think that they'll improve with him at quarterback. But it is just a very strange scenario, what's going on with all this transfer portal stuff. Guys that kind of have to find refuge at smaller programs because they're getting pushed out of programs that they thought that they were safe at. But that's just the state of the environment now. Will Rogers, Mississippi State to Washington. He's a name that I guess I'm familiar with. I actually don't have any notes on him. I think I was planning on putting some notes to him. But, I mean, I don't think obviously Washington isn't really in the running for a national championship this year. I think that last year was kind of their biggest push since whatever the last year was they made it to the playoff. Was it 2014, 2015, something like that? I think it's going to be a while before Washington can really see themselves in that conversation. But I'm pretty sure Will Rogers had been at Mississippi State for a few years. He was pretty good. We'll see how it goes. Tyler Van Dyke, going from Miami to Wisconsin. He was the ACC Rookie of the Year his freshman year. As much as I hate to say it, because he absolutely balled out against us, kind of made us look silly. But then the very next year, he was absolute trash. He was not good at all at sophomore year. He had so much promise and then instantly crashed. And then this past year at Miami, he was all right. He wasn't really the best guy. He was, probably top half, kind of in that mid-range ACC quarterback. But ACC wasn't really a strong conference, so I don't think that he's going to do all that much at Wisconsin. I'd say his best odds in the NFL draft, I'd put him at like 6th round maybe, at the very best, maybe 5th round if he really plays well. But um, yeah, I don't see too much promise with him. Just kind of the roller coaster of his career. Now let's talk about a guy that I really love. Um, Absolutely no bias here, but Grayson McCall, coming from Coastal Carolina to NC State. No one's talking about him. I don't really know why, because he was by far the best quarterback in the group of five for like the past 3 years. He was a 3-time Sun Belt Player of the Year. I know it's the Sun Belt, but the Sun Belt's the best group of five conference. Player of the Year, 3 years in a row. Only reason why I didn't get it last year was because he got injured halfway through the season. He's a 6th-year senior. He's got a whole lot of experience. He got rid of the mullet. We loved the mullet when it was there, but he's a full-grown man now. He's got to get a working man's haircut. So I think that he's going to be great at NC State. Brennan Armstrong, he was a great locker room guy, great leader for the team. Kind of lacked in the technical skill. He couldn't make deep throws. Uh, Grayson McCall fits that locker room aspect that we lost with Brennan Armstrong, but then he takes it a step further and actually has, physical attributes that you want in a quarterback to lead your team. So I really like Grayson McCall going to NC State. I think that is really cool. And honestly, I don't have a problem with us going under the radar in the preseason. People don't want to talk about Grayson McCall. They don't have to talk about him. But I just want to say he's a dog. That's all I'm going to say. All right, KJ Jefferson. He was at Arkansas for a good minute there. He had one really good season in 2021 when Arkansas went 9-4. He had 21 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 6 rushing touchdowns. He was playing pretty well. 2022, he did all right. I mean, he was throwing the ball a lot. He had 24 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. So he was good for those 2 years. And then things started to go south in 2023. He had 19 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. That might have been kind of a program problem. Arkansas, maybe they lost a lot of talent. I wasn't paying a whole lot of attention to them because they went 4-8 halfway across the country. So I wasn't paying attention to what was going on with them. But it does remind me a little bit of Brennan Armstrong when he was at UVA. He had a couple really good seasons. He led the NCAA in passing yards for one season. People thought that he was the next big guy, and then his last year at UVA, he just did terrible. And people were like, "What the heck happened to this guy? He fell off, man. He fell off." And then he went to NC State. And he was a little bit shaky at the beginning of the season, but he finished strong, was a good system quarterback. So maybe KJ Jefferson will do that at UCF. I think that UCF is a program of the future. I think that they're growing stronger every year. Obviously, 2017 was a magical season, but they're a better program than I think a lot of people are giving them credit for. So hopefully he does well. I don't think that he's going to be amazing, but I think UCF will go like 7-5, 8-4 maybe. Now let's talk about a guy that used to play at UCF, Dylan Gabriel. So he was at UCF for 3 years, and then Oklahoma for 2, and now he's in his 6th year as a starter. It's not like 6th year in general. He's had 6 years of actual playing time. He had one medical redshirt year in 2021, but other than that, he's been the outright starter for 4 seasons, and now in his 5th season as an outright starter. I mean, it's just like Bo Nix in terms of experience. He's going to be an instant fit. He was extremely good at Oklahoma last year. I'm pretty sure he was either Big 12 Player of the Year or first team All Conference. Either way, he was the best quarterback in the conference. So I think that he should be an immediate fit for Oregon. I think that they're going to be national championship contenders, which we'll talk about in just a second when I go through my top 25. But the last transfer I want to talk about is DJU. Yui Ungalale. I swear, man, it's been like 3 years. Still can't get his last name. He's kind of college football's journeyman. He's been at a different team almost every year. His first year at Clemson, I'll never forget that game because he just was was not good at Clemson. And the first game when that was exposed, how not good he was against NC State. And I was on the front row, and I was painted up, and me and all my friends, we painted out who's DJ, front and center. I know he saw it because he crumpled under the pressure, whooped their butts in overtime. It was amazing. And so that was kind of the precedent that was set at Clemson, was like, okay, he's not our guy. He started to get better the next year, but the damage was already done last year. So fans wanted Cade Klubnik, who was, pretty good freshman. I think he was a 5-star out of high school. And so they went with him and kind of pushed DJ to the side, and he went to Oregon State. And then he played pretty well there. He had similar stats with arguably less of a supporting cast. Obviously, Oregon State isn't going to have the same type of talent that Clemson is. And now he's at Florida State, who, in my opinion, is going to be the favorite to win the ACC. So his draft stock should be going up. He might be a first-round guy. He's got the size and the physical attributes. We'll just see how well he plays at the highest stage of football, because he kind of choked at Clemson, did well in a smaller market at Oregon State. Let's see if he can actually step up this year at a big-time program with Florida State. All right, now time to talk about my top 25. So the format is going to be different than most top 25s you see, and I'll give a full explanation of it. So I really want my ranking to be based off of who is most likely to make the playoffs. That's kind of the biggest thing that I want to look at. So that means that strength of schedule will play a role, and your conference allegiance will play a role. For SEC teams, making the playoff is going to be a lot harder. I was looking at some power rankings from other sources. I think it was teams like Kentucky and South Carolina, and these teams are like 7-5 programs that will make a bowl game. Maybe they're not in the top 25. They were in like the bottom half. They were like number 11, number 12 in the conference based on other people's opinions on them. So I'm like, man, that's crazy. But then you look at who the top teams are, and there are just so many that not everyone can make the playoff from the SEC. Same thing kind of goes with the Big Ten. It's just the way things are now. There's higher competition. So I'm giving a little bit of preference to the conferences that where the field is a little bit more open. But then also the strength of schedule kind of evens it out. Like Liberty should go 12-1, 13-0, but they also play like the worst teams in the whole entire league. So we'll figure that out. And then my top 12 teams are the 12 playoff teams. My top 12 is going to be my prediction for the playoff. I know that's a little bit strange. I honestly think it's a little bit strange the more I looked into it, because the format of the playoff is a little bit wonky. So the number 1 through number 4 teams are all the conference champions from the Power 4 conferences, which kind of makes things a little bit strange. Number 5 through 11 are the teams that I think are the best at-large bids, the teams that don't win their conference but still had a really great season and should make the conference. And then the number 12 team is the best group of 5 champion. So number 12 is going to be ahead of a lot of teams that are technically better than them, but they're playing in the playoff. Everyone else is sitting on the couch watching the game. So that's why I have them at number 12. You'll see who it is. And then number 13 through 18 are kind of teams that I think have a good shot at making the playoff, but are not the favorites. And then number 19 through 25 are kind of potential Cinderella teams if they maybe have a magical season. Now, before I get to the top 25, I want to talk about just some of my honorable mentions, teams that I think could be in the top 25. Honestly, the more I think about it, the more I want to put a couple of these teams in the top 25, specifically Virginia Tech, because I was looking at their returning production. They returned their entire starting offense and 9 defensive starters, and they finished the year last year pretty strong. So honestly, I I would not be surprised if they found themselves in the top 25 by the end of the year. Another honorable mention is USC. They obviously lost Caleb Williams and struggled even when they had him, Heisman level quarterback. But I still think that Lincoln Riley is one of the best coaches in the country, and they have a solid defense, so I won't count them completely out. So I'll throw their name in there as well. And then Kansas, kind of just because I feel like Kansas is just one of those like fan favorite teams you just want to see play well. They went 7-5 last year, and they were all like one score games in all 5 of those losses except for Texas. So they could sneak up in the top 25 with a couple upsets. Who knows? Who knows? But let's get to the actual top 25 that I have. Number 25 is Liberty. If we're looking at just talent, just skill, they're not top 25. But then when you look at their schedule, it's like, well, shoot, there's only one game that they would be the underdog in, and that's at App State. So they should go 12-1. I'll just list off their entire schedule. Versus Campbell, who's FCS. At New Mexico State, they were pretty good last year for Conference USA standards, but or was that New Mexico? I can't remember. I think it was New Mexico State. Either way, Liberty, I'm pretty sure, beat them twice last year. Versus UTEP, no one cares about UTEP. ECU, god-awful in the American Conference. At App State, that game will actually be good. If I can get tickets to that game, that would actually be pretty cool. Liberty and App State will probably be my favorite group of 5 matchup this year. Versus Florida International, no one cares about them. At Kennesaw State, they were in the FCS last year. Versus Jacksonville State, they were in the FCS 2 years ago. At Middle Tennessee, they were no good. At UMass, absolutely terrible program. They shouldn't even be in the FBS. Versus Western Kentucky, I don't think that they were good last year. They might have gone like 6-6. Again, not a team that they should be losing to. And then at Sam Houston, who was in the FCS 2 years ago. So they have a very good chance of going undefeated again. So that's why I have them at 25. I think they have a chance at making the playoff, but it would kind of be contingent on other teams kind of choking at the end, like what happened this past year, where I think it was SMU and Tulane were ahead of Liberty. And then one or both of them lost, and then Liberty kind of just snuck in ahead of them, made it to the Fiesta Bowl. So I think there's an outside chance that they could sneak into the playoff. Number 24, I have West Virginia. I think that they're going to be America's team this year. They're probably going to be the team that you see play really good against big opponents at home. They have 2 big games at home. They have Penn State week 1. Mark this down. This is my upset of week 1. I have West Virginia beating Penn State. And then they also play K-State at home, so that will be a big game. And I think just knowing their fan base, knowing kind of their just the culture of West Virginia, I think that they're a team that's going to step up in big games. But they might drop a couple silly games. And, they didn't really have a flashy offseason of big transfers and commitments, but it was an effective one. They kind of had a whole lot of holes, and they were able to fill most of those. So I like them this year. At number 23, I have Miami. I was honestly tempted to leave Miami completely out, but every single preseason ranking that I was looking at, I looked at at least 5, had them extremely high as number 13. And I don't really know where that's coming from, but I don't buy it for 1 second, because just of the track record that Miami has. I know it's been different coaches and different things, but the institution of Miami, every single year since 2017 was the only year that they were actually good. They've done nothing, and they've been hyped up preseason every single year. 2023, they finished 7-6. They weren't ranked preseason, but they had that really embarrassing loss where they ran it instead of just kneeling the ball. So that's the reputation of Cristobal right now in Florida. In 2022, They were preseason number 16, finished unranked. 2021, preseason number 14, finished unranked. 2020, they went 8-3, but that was also the COVID season when games were all strange. There wasn't really a home field advantage. They had a shortened season. So there's a little asterisk besides that one. 2019, they were always trash. And then 2018, they were preseason number 8 and then finished unranked. So if I see them in the top 20 this year, don't count on them to stay in the top 25. Like, I don't trust him for 1 second, especially Mario Cristobal. I think he's overhyped. I don't really get it. He was a terrible head coach at FIU, somehow gets hired at Alabama, and then he's an elite recruiter at Alabama. But you also have to remember that it's Alabama. It's not that hard to recruit when you're the coach of Alabama, and your head coach is Nick Saban, the greatest college coach of all time. And then he goes to Oregon, has a few good seasons there, but the Pac-12 was especially weak at this point in time. Their only other opponent was Utah. They were the only other top 25 team in the Pac-12. And then he goes to Miami, and he hasn't turned things around yet. Maybe Cam Ward helps him turn things around. Like I said, I think he's good. I don't think that he's their saving grace. So that's why I have him at number 23. I just always get this way with Miami because everyone always overhypes them at the beginning of the year. It's so frustrating to me. All right, number 22, I have Oklahoma. If it wasn't for their schedule, I would have them a lot higher, but they have the hardest schedule in the country. It's ridiculous. It's extremely possible that they could go 6-6 this year, maybe even 5-7 if they can't win big games, because they have to play Tennessee, Texas, at Ole Miss, at Missouri, Alabama, and at LSU. Those are all extremely good programs, at least preseason. And yeah, it's just kind of a little harsh reality for them because they could be playing in the Big 12 and have a much more favorable schedule, probably have a good chance of making the playoff. But this year, they've got to go through the absolute meat grinder. It's ridiculous. So unfortunately for them, they have a very tough path to take this year. Number 21, I have Arizona. When I first heard about Arizona this year, I was like, oh yeah, they had a good season last year. They should be able to build on it this year. I think at first I had them at like number 15 or number 16. But then the more I looked into it, kind of the more I had to drop them down a little bit lower and a little bit lower. So they lost Jed Fish, their head coach, who's now at Washington. And they had been terrible for years. And Coach Fish resurrected their team, and now he's gone. So who'd they get? They got Brent Brennan. Sounds like a fake name, but honestly, his career at San Jose State right before Arizona, kind of mid in the Mountain West. He was not that great. I think that he went 8-4 one year, 8-5, something like that. He won the conference one year, but a lot of his seasons just were not super great. So I don't know how proven he is there. I think that the key here is that they were able to keep two of their best players on offense. Noah Fafita, he was a Pac-12 Rookie of the Year last year in a tough conference of quarterbacks, so that's very promising. And then Tetaroa McMillan, he's a receiver that's 6'5". That's cool. It's just cool to see a receiver that's just like a giant. He's not a tight end. He's a wide out, and he's 6'5". Second team all conference last year. I think that he'll be a stud this year. And the Big 12 is wide open. If Brent Brennan actually is the real deal, maybe I didn't do enough research on him. I just kind of looked at his head coaching record. Then they could find themselves in the conference championship game. That would not be out of the question. So I think that they're at least in that conversation to get a conference championship. Number 20, I have Louisville. They're kind of a sleeper school. I feel like not a lot of people are talking about Louisville and how good they are. They went 10-2 last year and played in the ACC championship, which is no joke. I think that Jeff Brom is a really good coach. He got 31 incoming transfers. I think that their biggest question is at quarterback. They have a transfer from Texas Tech, Tyler Shaw. It's probably Shaw. Tyler Shaw. But he's unproven. I don't think they've ever started more than 4 games. We'll see what they do there. But 31 incoming transfers, that's a lot. I think the only team that had more transfers was Colorado, and that's just kind of Colorado's game. So Louisville's got some cooking up. We'll see if quantity outweighs quality. Number 19, I have Oklahoma State, and honestly, I don't really know a whole lot about Oklahoma State this year. What I do know is that they're bringing back a lot of talent from an already top 25 team last year, and I just like Mike Gundy. I think that he's one of the best coaches in the country. He has never had like a straight up bad season besides his very first year. Um, so he's always going to be in the mix for a conference championship. I think especially this year with Oklahoma and Texas not in the conference anymore. Like I was saying, conference is wide open. I think that they're definitely in the mix to win the Big 12 this year. Number 18, I have LSU. Last year they had a playoff caliber offense and a terrible defense. They're kind of the anti-Iowa. So they did what they needed to do to fix the defense. They got a new defensive coordinator, Blake Baker, from Missouri. Missouri had a pretty good defense last year, so I think that's a good move. But the only problem is they lost like all their star power on offense. Obviously, Jaden Daniels, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr., and people expect them to be better this year. You lose your 3 best players on the team, and your defense still is unproven. You don't know how good their defense is going to be this year. And people think that they're going to be a playoff team. I don't think so. They don't have the hardest schedule, but it's still not easy. They play USC week 1. They play Ole Miss in October, Texas A&M, Alabama, and Oklahoma down the stretch. It's just kind of the state of the matter being in the SEC is you're going to have a lot of tough matchups. So we'll see. Their floor could be as low as 7-5. Their ceiling could be like 9-3. But again, offense is unproven, defense is unproven. A lot of question marks with this team. Number 17, I have Clemson. Obviously, the story with them is the transfer portal. Like, bro, Dabo is just being a little weenie about it, if I'm being 100% honest. They have 0 incoming transfers, of course, and they have 12 players transferring out. I think that's something that a lot of people don't want to talk about. Clemson lost a good amount of production. They lost Bo Collins. He was their second leading receiver. They lost Andrew Makuba, who was Defensive Rookie of the Year in 2021. He was their third leading tackler last year. But just overall, they lost depth across the board. Maybe they didn't lose a whole lot of starters, but they lost a lot of their backups that are going to be playing more later in the season. So that means that it's going to be a little bit tougher towards the end of the year if you're having to play a lot of freshmen that don't really know what's going on towards the end of the year. And there's a couple of trap games there. They play Louisville and at Virginia Tech, and obviously their rivalry game with South Carolina. That could spell trouble. Now, I do think that they're going to be solid with a lot of their key players returning. Cade Klubnik, I mean, he's got potential. People want to trash on him, but, you know, he's a 5-star out of high school. He can't be complete trash, you know? So he's got potential, and his stats weren't that bad at Clemson. It's just that they weren't winning the tougher games. If they're going to be a very front-heavy team, if they don't have a lot of depth, so they got to get their wins in at the beginning of the season, then that should be fine then. Get your wins in at the beginning of the season. If you struggle at the end, then oh well. The only problem is all of their toughest games are at the beginning of the season. They play Georgia week 1, they play NC State week 3, and at Florida State week 5. They actually play App State week 2. App State could... What if App State upsets them? Who knows? It could happen. They could start the year 1-4. So we'll see. But obviously, you can never count Clemson out in the ACC. They ran that conference for years with the same staff pretty much. So I'm never going to count them out. They could very well win the conference. Much like the Big 12, the ACC is wide open. But there are a couple teams that I like more than Clemson. And obviously, you probably saw this coming. It's NC State at number 16. We did really well in the transfer portal. We were somehow able to keep on to Casey Concepcion, breakout freshman player. He was the best player on the team as a true freshman. Who knew that was going to happen? Well, not the best player on the team, best player on offense. Can't forget about Peyton Wilson. But we kept him. Everyone thought he was going to go to a big school, but he stayed here. Grayson McCall obviously comes in, fills in that role from Brendan Armstrong, like I was talking about. And then they also got a lot of passing weapons. They got Noah Rogers. He was a big-time recruit from Ohio State, redshirted there, coming back home to North Carolina. He's going to be wide receiver number 2, if not wide receiver number 1. So we got 2 like elite wide receivers now. Got Justin Jolie, who's high-end tight end from UConn, and then we have Wesley Grimes from Wake Forest. So those are all guys that are instant plug-ins. And then we also have a full running back committee. We had no one last year, absolutely no one. Our best running back was Kendrick Raphael, who was, again, a true freshman. He was supposed to be like 3rd or 4th string, ended up being our starter the last few weeks. And he'll still get playing time this year. Don't worry about that. But Jordan Waters transferred from Duke. Duke had a really good season last year. Unfortunately, pretty much all of their key players and coaches left. So my condolences to Duke fans. But yeah, Jordan Waters, great running back from Duke. Hollywood Smothers, transfer from Oklahoma. He's kind of a speedster back, kind of a Nyheim's type of guy for my NC State fans. And then on the defensive side, we lost Peyton Wilson, which is going to be tough. But if I'm being honest about our defense last year, we were way too dependent on him. And we saw that in the Pop-Tart Bowl when he didn't play, and our defense just fell apart right in front of our eyes. And we got a lot of transfers coming in to kind of pick up the loss in production that we had from him. So the defense is maybe not going to have a star, but overall it should be better because we have a lot of depth, a lot of guys at different positions that can move around. And then I think the biggest thing that NC State has going for them is they have a super easy schedule. They only have 2 top 25 opponents. They play Tennessee week 1, or no, I think week 2 technically, and then Clemson. So if they don't lose any stupid games, which, crossing my fingers, knock on wood if there was any wood, then they should go 10-2 and hopefully make it to the ACC championship. They could even go 11-1 if they beat Clemson, which I think that they could, but it's at Clemson, which is just a tough place to play. So I'm not going to count on them beating Clemson, but I definitely think that they can. I think that's a toss-up game, 55-45 type of game in Clemson's favor. Number 15, I have K-State. So quick shout out to Deluxe. He's a big K-State guy. Obviously, I had that video with him, and we've kind of stayed in contact since then. And he gave me a little bit of insight on their team. And he was telling me that, their backfield, stacked. At quarterback, they have Avery Johnson, dog. At running back, they have DJ Giddens, dog. And then his backup, Dylan Edwards from Colorado, dog. They lost most of their production on O-line, which was one of the best in the country last year. So that's a little bit of a concern. But I think that they still have a lot of potential, especially in the Big 12. So his prediction is 9-3, which I think is reasonable. I think that they might be a boom and bust team. Not boom and bust. Boom or bust team. But I think that they have maybe a 25% chance of winning the Big 12. They could go 11-1. They could go like 7-5, and I might just look like an idiot saying that they're going to play in the Big 12 championship. At number 14, I have Tennessee. So people are putting a lot of faith in Nico. Oh my Lord, how many players have all these unique last names? I respect it, but man, is it I am a Leva? Is that how you say it? I don't know. I'm sorry if I'm butchering these names. But he redshirted last year. He's unproven, but obviously big-time recruit. So we'll see how good he is. He's got some weapons too. Squirrel right. I think that if you're a player and you're listed as your nickname, then you're gonna be raw. You're gonna be a good player. So just by the name alone, it's just cool. So I like them at 14. I think that if their offense is as good as people want it to be, then they're a playoff team. But like I was saying, largely unproven. Everybody has a plan until you get punched in the face. And you're getting punched in the face a lot when you're in the SEC. And there are only so many teams that can make it into the playoff from one conference. And I already have a lot of teams from the SEC making it. So I have them at 14 for now, but definitely in the mix to get into the playoff. Number 13, I have Penn State. So let's be real. If Penn State makes a playoff, they're probably a first round exit. They're just kind of known for not stepping up in big games. And so is that what my assumption is this year? Absolutely. I know their track record. I know that they're probably going to lose to Michigan. Or no, they don't play Michigan this year. I know that they're going to lose to Ohio State. And then, like I was saying, I think they're going to lose to West Virginia week 1, which unfortunately might be what gets the committee to not pick them. So the number 11 team I have, which I'm going to talk about in a second, I have dropping 3 games, but they're all really, really strong games. So it's like 3 losses to really good teams. Will that outweigh 2 losses with 1 good team and 1 like not so great team? Who knows? But we'll talk a little bit more on that in just a second. But at number 12, I have my group of 5 team that I want in the playoff. I have Boise State. Man, we are losing daylight. So I'm going to keep going fast. Now remember, this doesn't mean that they're straight up the 12th best team in the conference or 12th best team in the country, but I do think that they'll be the number 12 seed in the playoff. They're the most likely team to get that last spot because they'll win their championship, and I think that the Mountain West is probably going to be the strongest group of 5 team. But it could be anyone's game. It could be Liberty. It could be App State. It could be Tulane. Or it could just be some random team that comes out of nowhere. It could be like, who knows, like Troy or Western Kentucky or Texas State. But I think that Boise State has the most upside. They have Malachi Nelson, who's a former 5-star out of high school, who's transferring from USC. And Boise State won the Mountain West last year, and they're returning 18 starters. So I have them at number 12. Number 11, I have Michigan. They're the last at-large bid. This was the team I was talking about that I have with 3 losses because they play Oregon, Texas, and Ohio State, which from everything that I've seen, everything that I've heard, all the research I've done, all 3 of those teams are in the top 5. And I think that these will be close games too. I don't think that they're going to get blown out by any of these teams. So is 3 close games to 3 top 5 opponents worse than 2 losses that Penn State will have? These are legitimate questions. This is kind of the downside of having a larger playoff, is there's a little bit more nuance in those teams that are right on the bubble. So you can swap Penn State with Michigan if you really feel inclined. But that's who I have at number 11 for now. At number 10, I have Missouri, which if I'm looking at any of the teams I have in the playoff or in the top 25 in general, if I'm looking at this after the season ends and saw that I had Missouri in the top 10 and then they ended up going like 6-6 or some crap, I'm just going to look like a fool. So this is the one that I have the most doubt with, but here's what they have going for them. Their quarterback, Brady Cook, is coming back. He's the best player on the field for them, so that's going to be huge. They also have all-conference wide receiver, Luther Burden, coming back. He'll probably be a big-time NFL guy. And then they have a couple transfers on offense. So they have Nate Noel and Marcus Carroll. So they'll have depth at running back. And then here's what scares me, though, with Missouri. They lost their defensive coordinator. All those positives I was talking about was on offense. I didn't do a deep dive on their defense. I don't know what their defense looks like, but they might be taking a half step back on the defensive side. And then also, they're Missouri. 2 years ago, you'd call me crazy if I had Missouri this high with Drinkwitz as their coach. So who knows if they'll be able to turn this into an actual dynasty or if that was just something that was just a fluke last year. I don't want to say fluke, but a memorable season that was not replicatable. Number 9, I have Alabama. Now, obviously, they don't have Nick Saban anymore, but Kalen DeBoer, he's a winner, man. He's only lost 9 games in 4 seasons as a D1 head coach, and they still have the number 3 transfer class in the country. So they've still got a lot of things going for them, and they have Jalen Milroe. Maybe a lot of Alabama fans like to hate on him because he's not a generational talent like Jalen Hurts or Tua, but he's a guy that had good stats. He played well, but maybe he's just not at the standard that Alabama wants him to be. Um, but I think that they'll still make the playoff this year. I don't think that there's a super whole lot of question with that. Um, so even though they're still in kind of a rebuilding mode, don't count them at all. Don't count them out at all this year. They will still be a good team, in my opinion. Number 8, I have Notre Dame. Obviously, I was talking about Riley Leonard. Played through injuries all season last year, and he was really, really good when he was healthy. So if he can stay healthy this year, uh, they should be good at quarterback. And Notre Dame in general, they've just kind of had flashes of showing that they can be championship contenders. You know, they beat Ohio State that one year. They'll have big wins every now and then. They'll make it to the playoff, but then they'll kind of fall apart. So they haven't been able to put a full season together for the longest time. I think there's some stat where it's like they've never won a major bowl game since the BCS or something like that. So we'll see if they can actually pull things together. But right now, I think that they're pretty good. I think they're looking pretty good. And dude, whoever is in charge for making sure that schedules are evenly matched and everything needs to be fired, because Notre Dame just has the most unbalanced schedule of all time. They have 9 home games. They only have 3 away games. Like, who let that happen? Now, granted, a couple of their away games are pretty tough. They play at Texas A&M, who's going to be a rough and rowdy crowd, and then at USC, which is, you know, technically a rivalry game. USC, they're a good team. But then the only other 2 games I think will really be any challenge to them is Louisville and Florida State. Florida State will be a really good game. But other than that, I mean, they could easily go 11-1. They could breeze to 11-1, maybe even 12-0. But yeah, their schedule definitely favors their odds of getting into that top 12. Number 7, I have Ole Miss. Now, I feel like even though maybe I'm not like the hugest Ole Miss fan, I kind of just want them to do well this year. I don't really know why. I don't know if Lane Kiffin is just kind of a fun character to witness, but I feel like they're kind of the new kid on the block. They've got the cool uniforms. Their quarterback's name is Jackson Dart. That's like the coolest quarterback name of all time. And I think that he's top 5 in the country. I think that he's easily top 5 in the country at quarterback. And they also had the number 1 transfer portal, according to 247. So they've got a lot of things going for them. I have them at number 7. I've seen them as high as number 5. Honestly, I think the only reason why I don't have them at number 5 or number 4 maybe, no, at number 5, is because that number 3 and number 4 team are my ACC and Big 12 champions. So again, the rankings are a little bit out of whack, but I have them at number 7. Don't hate on me if you want them to be higher. Number 6, I have Oregon. They can't be in the top 4 because I have them losing in the Big 12 championship. But I do think that Dan Lanning is building a dynasty there at Oregon. So I think they're looking pretty good this year. Dylan Gabriel, like I was saying, he's the most experienced college football player, definitely this year, maybe of all time. I think that he's on track to have like the most starts as a college quarterback in history. And they also return a lot of production from last year as well. So they have a lot of returning guys. They have a lot of key players coming in as transfers. And like Ole Miss, I think that they're kind of an easy team to cheer for. Now, maybe I'm a very visual person, so it might just be that they have cool colors and cool uniforms. But that's kind of my take on them. I kind of want them to do well. Shake things up in the Big Ten. Why not, you know? Number 5, I have Texas. I'm not a big Texas fan. I think that they're one of those teams that's easy to hate on, but I think that they're going to be really good this year. I would have them at number 3, but I have them losing in the SEC championship, and they're looking just as good as they were last year. I mean, obviously they have Quinn Ewers coming back. I think that he might be the best quarterback in the country this year. Again, this is kind of a guy that doesn't know ball that's saying this, but I think that he's one of the best guys out there. I mean, if he's starting over two other guys that could be starters anywhere else in the country, I think that says a lot about how good of a quarterback he is. And then they also filled a lot of the holes that they needed to through the transfer portal. They got Isaiah Bond at wide receiver, Amari Niblack at tight end, and Andrew Makuba at safety. He was one of those key guys from Clemson that left. CJ Baxter, he returns at running back. So they're going to have a high-powered offense. It's going to be interesting to see how they play in the SEC with, all of the top talent that's going on there. They have a tough schedule, so yeah, it'll be cool to watch them play this year. Number 4, I have Utah. Now, I'd actually have them at number 8 or number 9, but I think that they'll be the 4th best conference champion this year. So that means they get the number 4 spot. Don't hate on me. Hate on the playoff committee for making that decision. A lot of people don't believe in the Utah hype. And honestly, I didn't either until I looked into what their story was last year, and they just had a lot of injuries last year. They were probably a conference contender last year if they didn't have so many injuries. And a lot of those players that they didn't have last year, they're going to return this year. And they kind of seem like the only team in the Big 12 that is solid all around. There are a lot of teams that, are missing pieces. K-State, got to replace that O-line. Arizona, new coach, kind of unproven. Oklahoma State, honestly, actually, I don't know how bad Oklahoma State is. Oklahoma State, I just don't know enough about. I need to do my homework on them. But yeah, Utah just seems like the team that is the most solid all around and can kind of withstand anything. Number 3, I have Florida State. They'd actually be about number 7 or number 8 in the country, but again, that's their seeding for the playoff. And they did extremely well in the transfer portal. They obviously got DJU. They lost a lot of guys to the NFL this past year, but they did a full reload. Mike Norvell is definitely doing the most he can to say, like, hey, this was not a one-season type of thing. Florida State is back, and we're here to stay. So I think that they're the favorite in the ACC. They're the team that everyone is looking at on their schedule that they're like, crap, we've got to beat this team if we want to make it to the ACC championship. Now, it would be pretty wild with the ACC and with the Big 12 for that matter if NC State won the ACC, they're at least the number 3, maybe the number 4 team in the playoff. We would have a first round bye. Like, what? We could go 9-3, win the ACC championship on some miracle, and then have a first round bye in the playoff? That's crazy. That's nuts. But I'm honestly all for it because as an ACC fan, that's just kind of cool. It's like, oh man, we get a little special treatment for being the small conference, and all these other teams that, went to these big conferences for the money, they're paying the price now. So yeah, it'll be interesting if like NC State wins it, or Louisville, or Virginia Tech. Who else? K-State. That would be cool to see K-State in the playoff. Arizona. Any of those teams that you wouldn't guess in a million years would be in the college football playoff. If they were actually playing for a national championship, that would be sick. All right, number 2, I have Georgia. The only reason I don't have Georgia at number 1 is because they have a harder schedule than Ohio State. So, there's an off chance that they could lose a game in the regular season. They play Clemson, they play at Alabama, they play at Texas, they play at Ole Miss, and they play Tennessee. So it's by no means a walk in the park. They have a lot of challenges ahead of them, but I think they'll be the favorite for all of those games. But yeah, I think that they're just a solid team. Kirby Smart, he's kind of the next Nick Saban, in my opinion. Georgia's kind of the team now. But the other team I have is Ohio State. They're at number 1. They have a scary defense. They have a scary offense. The only question that I've heard from any of the experts about Ohio State is at quarterback. And like I was saying, they chose to get rid of Kyle McCord. It wasn't like, oh crap, Kyle McCord's going to Syracuse. What do we do? Let's get Will Howard. No, they were like, bro, we want Will Howard. We want this guy that can win games, that can run an offense. And so Will Howard is their guy. That's the guy that they went after. And he has the resume. He won a Big 12 championship. So that is my top 25. And now, finally, before the sun goes completely down, let's run through my playoff prediction. No one's doing it like me. No one's running through the entire postseason like I am. But I have the summary of every game listed out. So our first matchup is number 8 Notre Dame versus number 9 Alabama. I think that Alabama wins. Am I saying that just because it's funny to meme about Notre Dame choking in the postseason? Absolutely. Alabama wins that game. Notre Dame's immune to winning in the postseason. Get wrecked. Next, we have number 5 Texas versus number 12 Boise State. Sorry, Boise State. Texas wipes the floor. They're probably a little bit upset with the rules that they don't get a first round bye. Next matchup we have is Ole Miss versus Missouri. I think that the skill gap between Ole Miss and Missouri is realistically a lot greater than just 3 spots in the top 25. So I think that Ole Miss will win that game handily if they are to play each other. Then we have Oregon versus Michigan, which Michigan is the number 11 team. Are they going to be all that good? Oh, my light just went out. I don't know if that actually changes anything. Michigan is the number 11 because they lost those 3 games against top 5 opponents. They're playing Oregon again. I think that Michigan is going to be out for blood. They're going to be playing with nothing to lose. I think they upset Oregon, finally prove what they're worth, finally say we can win these big games. And so they advance to the next round. Then we have, in the second round, we have Ohio State versus number 9 Alabama. I think it's a classic matchup. I feel like we see this all the time in the playoff. But it's also not so classic of a matchup. Alabama's a new team. I think it'll be a good game, but Ohio State wins that one. Then we have number 4 Utah versus number 5 Texas. Texas is probably still pissed. They're like, we should be playing at home. What the heck are we doing in Utah? They play mad. I think that they win Utah handily. Then we have Georgia versus Ole Miss. Georgia's just a better team. They just are. They'll just win. Then we have Florida State versus Michigan. I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan is the favorite in this game. I think that Michigan upsets Florida State and they advance to the Final Four. It's crazy, man. We have a Final Four in college football now. So then, first Final Four matchup, we have Ohio State versus Texas. I think this will be a legendary matchup if it were to happen. Texas, one of the best offenses in the country. Ohio State, one of the best defenses. It would just be amazing to watch that game. But I like Ohio State in that matchup. Our last matchup before the finals is Georgia versus Michigan. Who would have thought? Number 11 seed makes it all the way to the semifinals. Unfortunately, Georgia's just a really good team. They bring the first ever football Cinderella run to an end. And lo and behold, after all that nonsense, having a 12-team playoff, having all these random teams, the BCS isn't good enough with 2 teams. We'll expand it to 4 teams with the college football playoff. 4 teams isn't good enough. Let's expand it to 12 teams. In the first year of the 12-team playoff, finals number 1 versus number 2. We had all that random crap just to get to number 1 versus number 2. We could have done the same thing with the BCS Bowl. So we have Ohio State versus Georgia. It's a toss-up. I'm going to pick Georgia just because they're going to be... I'm pretty sure that the championship is in Atlanta. They'll have a home crowd. It'll be an amazing atmosphere. And, yeah, that'll be all she wrote. So that is definitively everything. Dude, that is a loud helicopter. I don't know how well y'all heard that, but it was loud in my ear. But that is definitively everything that's going to happen this year in college football. I honestly loved making this video. This was a lot of fun, doing something a little bit unscripted. It's something that I might want to revisit this fall. Maybe do a week-to-week update. Maybe get some guests on the show. Um, I've kind of always thought about doing a little bit of a podcast, but never really got around to making it happen. So, um, yeah, I'm feeling good. I feel like I actually know at least a little bit about what's going on with college football. A lot of times I just go into the season not knowing anything. But this year it's like, hey, I know some of these players. I did my homework. Maybe I do know ball. Um, but yeah, let me know if you like this format. If you want to see a podcast down the road, I'll definitely give it a little bit more planning, figure it out, see if it's something that we can actually do on a consistent basis, but no promises. But yeah, anyways, thanks for watching. Thanks for being part of this. So yeah, stay safe out there. Peace.